I want you to imagine a scenario. You've probably lived through this exact situation 100 times, and it is, well, it's quietly maddening.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, so you're sitting across from a friend, maybe grabbing a coffee, and they are just like pouring their heart out about a problem they're having.
Right, like maybe it's their job or, their manager is driving them completely crazy.
Exactly. And because you are a good friend, you lean in, you listen, and you start offering some gentle, logical suggestions.
But every single time you offer a lifeline, they shoot it down.
Every single time you say, "Have you tried asking for a one-on-one meeting?" And they say, "Yes, but my boss never listens."
Yeah, or you say, what about transferring to a different department?
And they say, "Yes, but the market is terrible right now. I'd lose my seniority." It's like you think you are engaging in this constructive, empathetic conversation to solve a real problem, but you aren't.
No, you really aren't.
You are actually an unwitting pawn in a highly structured, totally unconscious psychological game.
It is, it's incredibly frustrating when you find yourself on the receiving end of that loop. The person just feels like they are draining your energy on purpose.
Yeah, like an emotional vampire.
Right. But what's fascinating here is that the goal of that conversation, for your friend anyway, isn't actually to find a solution to their workplace problem.
Wait, really?
Yeah, the solution is the absolute last thing they want. The hidden goal is to confirm a deeply held, unconscious belief they have about themselves and the world around them.
Which is exactly what we are decoding today. Our deep dive is focused on an explosive piece of pop psychology from 1964 called Games People, played by Eric Berne.
Such a landmark book. It was a massive runaway bestseller.
And the backstory alone is amazing, honestly. Berne actually funded the publication with his own personal savings because traditional publishers thought it was, too weird.
It was a massive gamble on his part.
But it paid off because he fundamentally changed the vocabulary we use to view our daily social interactions. So our mission today is to equip you with the tools to decode the hidden drama of your everyday life.
We want you to recognize the unconscious roles you're playing and ultimately learn how to break the cycle.
So where do we start?
Well, to get there, we can't just skip straight to the games themselves. Before we can identify the interpersonal traps we fall into, we have to understand the biological engines driving us.
Right, like why we even interact with other human beings in the first place.
Exactly. Berne argues that we don't just, want social interaction for entertainment. We biologically require it to survive. He categorizes these driving forces as the three hungers.
Okay, let's unpack this. What are the three hungers? Let's start with the foundation.
So the foundation is stimulus hunger. This is the primal, absolute biological need for physical and sensory contact.
Physical contact, like touch.
Yes, physical touch. Berne builds this theory by citing some rather harrowing clinical research by a psychoanalyst named Renee Spitz.
Oh, I read this part. It's pretty dark.
It is. Spitz studied infants in orphanages who were provided with perfectly adequate food, warmth, and shelter, but they were deprived of physical handling.
So they weren't rocked, held, or touched at all.
Right. And these infants didn't just become sad or withdrawn. Their biology literally began to shut down.
Oh, wow.
They sank into an irreversible physical and mental decline, a condition Spitz called hospitalism. Without physical touch, the brain essentially initiates a failure to thrive.
That is terrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
And this translates to adults, too. Parallel findings show that adults placed in total sensory deprivation can experience temporary psychosis within a matter of hours.
Just hours.
Yeah, we are biologically hardwired to need physical and sensory contact just to keep our nervous systems functional.
So it's not just a nice-to-have emotional bonus. It's a literal physical survival mechanism.
Exactly. And as we grow out of infancy, that primal need for physical touch matures. It evolves into the second hunger, which is recognition hunger.
Meaning we don't need to be constantly held anymore.
Right. We learn to accept more abstract, subtle forms of contact. We need acknowledgement that we exist in the social fabric. Berne defines any act that implies recognition of another person's presence as a stroke.
A stroke.
Okay. Yeah, a stroke is the fundamental unit of social action. It can be a smile, a compliment, a handshake, or it can be a frown, a bitter insult, or even a physical slap.
I have a way to look at this. Think of strokes as a twisted social currency.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, if you are starving for attention, if your recognition hunger is completely unfed and your bank account is at zero, Even a counterfeit bill is better than being totally broke.
That is a perfect analogy.
So a negative stroke, like a heated argument or a screaming match in the kitchen, still registers as currency. It still means someone is actively acknowledging you exist. People will literally pick fights just to get paid.
Take that financial metaphor a step further because the biology backs it up perfectly. If you keep accepting those negative strokes, you are essentially building a psychological debt.
Because your brain doesn't care if the attention is good or bad, right?
Exactly. Your biological wiring doesn't differentiate. When you get into a screaming match, your amygdala lights up. It releases a massive rush of stress chemicals like adrenaline, cortisol.
And the brain misinterprets that.
Yes. The brain misinterprets that intense chemical rush as survival validation. It screams, "I am interacting, therefore I am alive."
Man, that explains so much about toxic relationships.
It really does. We strongly prefer negative strokes to the terrifying void of no strokes at all. Which brings us to the third hunger, structure hunger.
Structure hunger, so how we fill our time.
Precisely. It's the existential problem of how to fill our waking hours. How do we structure our time to maximize the strokes we receive while minimizing the emotional risk of true vulnerability?
Right, because true vulnerability is scary. So we fill time with work or with empty rituals like saying hello in the hallway without stopping to chat.
Or safe pastimes like complaining about the weather.
Right.
Or, of course, we can fill it with games.
And to understand how we structure that time and why we gravitate toward those games, we have to look inward.
Yes, into the architecture of the mind.
Because Berne says we don't just have one single unified personality operating all the time. We actually have three distinct voices or ego states living inside our heads.
Taking turns at the steering wheel, essentially. The foundation of his entire clinical theory, which he calls transactional analysis, is built on these three ego states.
The parent, the adult, and the child.
Right. And it's important to note, he capitalizes these terms to distinguish them from actual parents or actual children. Let's break them down.
Okay, let's start with the parent.
The parent ego state is essentially a tape recording of the authority figures who raised you. It is entirely internalized.
So if your dad shouted and crossed his arms every time a mistake was made in the house, you just absorb that.
You absorb it completely. You might unconsciously adopt that exact physical posture and shouting pattern when you see a coworker make a mistake. It is recorded in your brain.
So it's critical, judgmental, heavily opinionated.
Or sometimes rigidly overprotective, yeah.
And it operates without analyzing new data. It just reacts.
Then you have the adult ego state. This is the rational data processing, present-oriented self, right? Exactly. It's the part of you that does the math to balance a budget or figures out the logistics of getting to the airport on time in heavy traffic.
So it is entirely objective. It doesn't get swept up in old childhood fears or parental judgments.
Spot on. And finally, there is the child ego state. This is crucial. It is not you acting childish. It is you acting childlike.
What's the difference?
It is the archaic state fixated in early childhood. It's your intuitive, emotional, spontaneous self from infancy. When you throw a tantrum because you didn't get your way, that's the child.
But when you burst into laughter at a silly joke, that's also the child.
Exactly. Both the joy and the frustration live there.
And here's a detail from the source material that completely caught me off guard. Berne actually considers the child state to be the most valuable part of the personality.
It's so counterintuitive, isn't it?
Totally. We spend so much of our adult lives prizing rationality and logic, trying to stay in that adult state. But the child state is where our creativity, our intuition, and our joy actually live.
And Berne notes that this state emerges most clearly during sex.
Right. Intimacy and sex aren't logical. They aren't driven by data processing like the adult state.
And they certainly aren't taught by the rigid internalized voices of our parent state.
Exactly. They are driven by the intuitive, spontaneous, sensory-focused child.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see how these three ego states are constantly active, constantly cycling, depending on the situation.
The adult keeps you alive in the present. The parent automates routine moral decisions.
And the child provides the creative drive. But the real friction and the exact birthplace of a psychological game happens when your internal ego states start interacting with other people's ego states.
Right, because we are constantly trading those strokes, that currency we talked about. Berne calls an exchange of strokes a transaction.
Yes. And when things go well, you have what he calls a complementary transaction. This is smooth sailing.
Give me an example of smooth sailing.
Let's say you are at work and you ask a colleague, what time is the budget meeting? You are asking from your rational adult state, looking for data.
And they check their calendar and say, 3 o'clock in conference room B.
Right. They're responding from their adult state.
Mhm.
Adult to adult. The communication wires are perfectly parallel. Everyone gets what they need.
But then you have crossed transactions,
Yeah.
and this is where communication completely derails.
It happens when the ego states mismatch. Imagine you are at home and you ask your partner a simple, objective question about finances. Did you pay the electric bill?
So I'm asking from my adult state, just looking for data.
Yes. But your partner, maybe carrying some historical insecurity about money, doesn't process it with their adult. They receive the question defensively. They snap back, "Why are you always nagging me? You never trust me to do anything right."
Whoa. Okay, so the wires just crossed violently. My guess is, in a healthy dynamic, we'd just stop talking, recalibrate, and try again.
You would hope so.
Yeah.
But instead of stopping, the partner shifted the entire communication layer. They didn't respond adult to adult.
They responded from their emotional, defensive child state.
Exactly. And they specifically directed their anger at what they perceive to be your critical parent state. The original objective topic, the electric bill, is completely lost in the emotional static.
The surface communication is broken, and a game is about to begin. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, it gets wild.
Because if games are born from this friction, from crossed wires and suddenly feeling like a scolded child, why would anyone willingly participate?
That is the million-dollar question.
I mean, Berne talks about games with names like Kick Me, where a person behaves in a way that practically begs to be punished, fired, or criticized by their peers just so they can act hurt and rejected later.
Yeah, it sounds insane when you spell it out.
Why would anyone consciously choose to play a game that makes them feel terrible?
This raises an important point, and the answer is the absolute linchpin to Berne's whole theory. They aren't consciously choosing it.
They don't know they're doing it.
No. Games are entirely unconscious. They rely on something Berne calls ulterior transactions.
What exactly makes a transaction ulterior?
An ulterior transaction has two distinct layers operating simultaneously. There is a socially acceptable, plausible surface layer, the actual words being spoken.
And underneath?
Underneath that, there is a hidden psychological layer where the real emotional maneuvering is happening. The people playing aren't aware of that hidden layer.
So they genuinely believe they're just reacting to life, just dealing with an annoying partner or an unfair boss.
Exactly.
So how does a game actually work mechanically? Break
Okay.
down the hidden layer for me.
Berne developed a very specific formula for the anatomy of a game. It goes like this: con plus gimmick equals response.
Okay, con plus gimmick equals response.
That leads to a switch, a cross-up, and finally a payoff. Let's map this onto the scenario we started the show with.
The friend complaining about their unsolvable problems over coffee.
Yes, Berne literally calls this party game, "Why don't you yes but?"
I really do love that he gave them these painfully accurate colloquial names.
They are brutally descriptive. So the first step is the con. This is the setup, the surface layer. Your friend says, "I'm so overwhelmed with my manager, I don't know what to do."
Okay, that's the con. What's the gimmick?
The gimmick is the psychological hook, is the vulnerability they are unconsciously exploiting in you. In this case, your gimmick is your genuine, perhaps slightly arrogant desire to be a helpful, wise friend. You want to fix it.
So I take the bait. That's the response. I slide into my problem-solving adult state, or maybe a nurturing parent state, and I say, let me help. Why don't you talk to HR?
And you think you're having a complimentary transaction. But now comes the switch. The direction of the game suddenly changes. Your friend says, "Yes, but HR is useless."
And then I offer another solution, and they offer another yes, but.
You are caught in a loop. You keep offering rational adult solutions, and they keep batting them away with defensive child excuses. Eventually, you run out of ideas, and you give up in exasperation.
Which leads to the cross-up. I'm sitting there bewildered, frustrated, and feeling like my help is completely useless.
And then comes the grand finale. The payoff.
What does the friend actually get out of this?
The payoff is the hidden psychological reward. For your friend, the payoff is confirming their deep-seated, unconscious script that nobody understands me.
Wow.
And also, my problems are uniquely unsolvable, therefore I don't have to take responsibility for changing my life. They walk away feeling vindicated in their helplessness.
And crucially, they collected a massive amount of strokes for me in the process. They secured my attention for an hour.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's incredibly manipulative, but completely invisible to the person doing it, and doesn't just happen in isolated pairs.
Oh no, it scales up.
I was looking through the source material you brought, and there's this concept you highlighted in the margins from a guy named Stephen Karpman, the drama triangle.
Yes, Cartman was a student of Berne's.
It looks like a map for this exact kind of codependency.
It is. The drama triangle perfectly maps the playing board for almost all of these games. The triangle has three rotating roles: the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer.
So in the yes but game we just discussed, your friend starts as the victim, feeling oppressed by their boss.
And you step in as the rescuer, swooping in to save the day with your brilliant advice, feeling indispensable.
But the roles rotate, right? That's what makes it a triangle.
They have to rotate, because here is the critical, often uncomfortable insight about the rescuer. A rescuer actually needs a victim to maintain their identity and feel valuable.
Ouch. Really?
Yes, if the victim suddenly became self-sufficient and solved their own problems, the rescuer would feel useless. So the rescuer unconsciously enables the victim, giving them just enough advice to keep them engaged, but not enough to actually cure them.
And the moment the rescuer gets too overbearing, the dynamic shatters. The victim suddenly feels controlled or patronized, so they switch roles and become the persecutor, attacking the rescuer.
Stop telling you what to do. You're trying to run my life.
Right. Now, the original rescuer is confused, hurt, and drops down into the victim role. I was only trying to help you, and look how ungrateful you are. It's a merry-go-round of misery.
It is a closed loop of emotional exhaustion, which leads to an even deeper level of analysis.
Let's hear it.
If we were playing these games unconsciously, if the drama triangle is so miserable and the roles just keep rotating endlessly, how do we ever get off the ride?
Better yet, who built the ride in the first place?
Exactly. Why does one person default to playing kick me, aggressively seeking out criticism, while another person constantly plays the game? Berne calls, "Now I've got you, you son of a bitch."
Wait, that's a real game name.
It is. It's where someone just waits in the weeds for people to make a minor mistake so they can pounce, play the persecutor, and feel morally superior.
Or the game Berne calls Ain't It Awful, where two people just sit around mutually complaining about the economy or the news just to validate their own pessimism without ever doing anything about it.
Right. Why do we gravitate toward these specific painful traps? Berne argues that these individual games are just the tactical, day-to-day moves in a much larger, overarching master blueprint that he calls a life script.
A life script. According to this theory, your life script is an unconscious life plan that was written during your early childhood, usually before the age of 7.
That's right.
Written based on what? Just absorbing our environment.
Primarily based on the subtle and overt messages you receive from your parents and early authority figures.
Give me an example of how that takes root.
Well, if a child repeatedly absorbs messages like, "You'll never amount to anything," or "The world is a dangerous place and people will always betray you," they unconsciously make a script decision.
They decide how they will play out the rest of their life based on that premise.
Yes. Berne suggests these scripts typically build toward one of two major conclusions: a miracle, like waiting for a magical rescuer to finally save them, or a catastrophe, like a bitter divorce, bankruptcy, or alienation.
So every game of Kick Me is just a tiny step toward fulfilling the catastrophic script that you are fundamentally unlovable.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean? Honestly, it feels incredibly deterministic and fatalistic. Are you telling me we are just doomed to play out a tragedy that was hardwired into our brains when we were toddlers?
It's a heavy thought.
That our arguments, our careers, our marriages are all just pre-programmed chess moves to reach a catastrophic finale we didn't even consciously choose?
You aren't the only one who finds that terrifying. In fact, that exact sense of fatalism and determinism is what caused a massive rift in the psychological community when the book came out.
I can imagine.
It's important we look at the criticisms of the source material to give you a balanced view. While games people play was a massive cultural phenomenon, it faced serious backlash from academics.
What was the main critique?
Critics heavily argue that Berne massively oversimplifies complex human psychology. The idea that all human interaction can be boiled down to these rigid, inescapable formulas and childhood scripts feels highly reductive.
Not to mention, it pathologizes completely normal behavior. Sometimes a conversation about the weather is just a conversation about the weather.
Right, exactly.
It's not necessarily a desperate, structure-hungry defense mechanism to avoid genuine intimacy. Sometimes you just want to know if you need an umbrella.
And critics point out that Berne's evidence is almost purely anecdotal. It is drawn entirely from his personal clinical practice and observations, rather than rigorous, peer-reviewed empirical data or controlled studies.
So it's more observation than hard science.
Plus, the book was published in 1964. The social norms embedded in the text, especially regarding the specific marital and sexual games he outlines, are heavily dated and reflect the biases and gender roles of that specific era.
It definitely shows its age in places, but at the same time, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Definitely not.
Even with its scientific flaws, the framework is just so undeniably useful for understanding human friction. Kurt Vonnegut actually reviewed the book when it came out and praised it.
Oh, Vonnegut loved it.
Yeah, he called it an amusing and clear catalog of the psychological theatricals that human beings play over and over again. It gives you a vocabulary for the weird manipulative dynamics you've felt your whole life but couldn't quite articulate.
That is the enduring legacy of the book. It offers a powerful, accessible lens for self-awareness. So if we accept that the theory has limitations but remains wildly useful in daily life, the obvious question is, how do we apply this?
How do you actually escape your childhood script and stop playing the games?
Berne calls the path beyond games autonomy. And he says achieving autonomy requires three distinct capacities: awareness, spontaneity, and intimacy.
Let's walk through those.
Yeah.
Awareness means you have to actually see the game happening in real time, right?
Yes. You have to recognize when you're sliding into the victim role or when your critical parent ego state has hijacked the steering wheel.
What about spontaneity?
The second capacity, spontaneity, is the ability to respond to the present moment freely without being trapped by your scripted historical reactions. It means recognizing the con and simply refusing to play.
So if someone throws out the bait for a game of why don't you yes but, spontaneity allows you to see the gimmick and choose not to take the bait.
Exactly. You refuse to play the complimentary rescuer role.
And the third capacity is intimacy. This is the ultimate goal, right? Relating to others openly and honestly with zero hidden agendas.
No ulterior transactions. No maneuvering for a secret emotional payoff. Just genuine, vulnerable connection. But getting there is hard.
Yeah, achieving autonomy isn't a switch you can just flip overnight. It requires rigorous practice. The source material outlines a very practical 30-day challenge to help build these mental muscles step by step.
I love this challenge.
Let's break this down for you so you can actually try it, because pacing is everything here. Week 1 is purely about awareness. You don't try to change your behavior yet, you just keep a journal.
Right. Write down your most frustrating interactions that week and ask yourself, what game was I playing? What was my hidden payoff?
And honestly, just observing without jumping in to fix it or defend yourself sounds agonizing.
It is agonizing because your brain wants the strokes. It wants the familiar payoff. But you have to establish the baseline.
Okay, so what is week 2?
In week 2, you shift to recognition. You try to spot the drama triangle in the wild. Notice when a colleague or a partner is playing the victim, the persecutor, or the rescuer.
And observe how quickly they switch roles when they feel threatened.
Exactly.
Then for week 3, the focus turns inward to ego state awareness. Pay close attention to your own internal voice. Notice when you are responding from the critical parent, the rational adult, or the emotional child.
The goal here is to practice purposefully shifting into the adult state when a conflict arises. If your partner snaps at you, can you process it as data rather than getting triggered into your own defensive child state?
The brain naturally resists this because dropping the parent or child state feels like dropping your armor.
It does. But if you can master that shift, you reach week 4 autonomy practice. This is where you put it all together. You practice direct communication.
If you need something, you ask for it cleanly, without a hidden agenda.
Yes. You refuse to participate in ulterior transactions. If someone tries to drag you into their game, you simply state your boundary and disengage.
It sounds straightforward, but it requires an enormous amount of vulnerability. You are dropping the armor and exposing your genuine needs.
It does. Giving up these games means giving up the reliable, familiar payoffs you've relied on your whole life to feel safe.
Wow.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, and it ties all the way back to the concept of structure hunger we discussed in the very beginning. We play games to fill our time, to give our interactions a predictable, dramatic shape that guarantees we get our strokes.
Right.
So if you successfully complete this challenge, if you give up all your games, your dramatic arguments, your righteous indignation as a persecutor, and your comfortable victimhood, what will you actually do with all that empty, quiet time?
That is a fascinating question.
True intimacy is the stated goal. But perhaps the scariest part of stopping the game isn't the vulnerability required. Think about that friend at the coffee shop, complaining in endless circles. If they stop complaining and you stop rescuing them, what is actually left for the two of you to talk about?
Nothing, maybe.
For many of us, the most terrifying obstacle to autonomy isn't the fear of getting hurt. It's the terrifying boredom of peace.